I'm saying both of those things, really. I'm saying that there were... what I'm trying to say through the whole lecture is that this system remains marked by the long shadow of certain liberal conceptions that continue from the 19th century. And I'm certainly suggesting that, and I'm also trying, and this is slightly slippery because there's no real causal, clear causal chain of connection that I'm pointing to, but I'm also saying that the fact that they're housed in these old Victorian buildings is a part of that. And it's a part of it that is produced both by the fiscal conditions that Britain faces, but also by the idea that it's fine for a workhouse to be repurposed as a hospital. And that completely fails to recognise that for many people going to a workhouse, even after it's repurposed as a hospital, has deeply, resonant symbolic fears. I've got to move on, but if I have time at the end, you can ask me again. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is talk about the Festival of Britain in 1951 as a way of trying to wrap this stuff up. So, you're also smart, you'll have immediately recognised that 1951 is, of course, the centenary year of the Great Exhibition of 1851. And the Festival of Britain was self-consciously designed as a restaging of the Great Exhibition, but a restaging not to build a cathedral to the liberal virtues of liberalism and free trade, as the Great Exhibition had been, but to showcase instead what it was that the new type of modern social democratic Britain was going to look like. Now, one of the reasons why the Festival of Britain was staged was because the Labour government was conscious that it had been less successful than it had wanted to in actually being able to provide the physical manifestations of the social democratic system that it sought to build. It recognised its own limitations in the systems that it had set up. And it recognised the continuing disenchantment of many with the climate of austerity that rationing was associated with. So the Festival of Britain was intended, as its official programme stated, to be a tonic to the nation, to try and lift everybody up into good spirits, and to show them that if they keep faith with this social democratic project, this will be the world that they will inhabit. It was meant to showcase all the things that could be achieved, but hadn't yet come to being. It was a showcase for this new technocratic vision of a social democratic country. And it was relentlessly modernist in design and implementation. Its main centre was here on London's South Bank. And much of this still, this is Festival Hall, which still stands more or less opposite the London Eye, a little bit further down, the big wheel, a little bit further down the river, but effectively there. So part of what this very modernist buildings and design features were meant to do was to be able to not just show people the world that they could inhabit, but also to cultivate their taste for a more sophisticated series of goods and designs. London was the real showcase of this sort of modernist vision. But it's important to recognise that unlike the Great Exhibition of 1851, there was also an attempt to democratise the process. And that was achieved by local festivals, by the idea that local towns could put on their own festival displays and events. It was meant to animate the sort of civic culture of these towns and to get them to think about their history and their vision of their own future. This was something that had been utterly absent in the Great Exhibition, which you'll remember had been primarily orientated around manufacturing and the goods of manufacturing areas. Many little local towns had their own festival events in 1951. And hopefully this will work. Yes, it will. So you can actually watch a movie without me talking.
This is the festival. Something Britain devised halfway through this century as a milestone between past and future to enrich and enliven the present. A diverse place of serious fun and light-hearted solemnity, reclaimed from the bomb rack and the decay of years. Here, in the heart of London.
It's no Labour, it's about 5 blues.
It is open house on the South Bank, to those from home and to those who come from other lands. How to show the essence of Britain. Here, beneath the dome of discovery, vast as a city square, appears the story of the great researches, of man's probing into mysteries, of his revelations of the hidden worlds, his mastery of unknown things, his harnessing of secret forces. This is the world of the pioneers, of Darwin, who opened new doors of thought, of Newton, of atomic research, of of Captain Cook, of nuclear physics, and great works of humanity. Florence Nightingale. Alexander Fleming. And so to the world of today, to the things we make, machines, radar, and jet propulsion, speed and ingenuity. The skills that made the British workman famous.
On that note, I'm not going to have time to talk about that. So the thing that I really want you to get there, you can watch the full movie from the website, is how self-consciously modernist the South Bank was, and what an emphasis was placed upon science and technology as transformative. This is very, very different to anything that you saw in the Great Exhibition. There's a very particular singling out of the things in the past that are thought to be workable for Britain's future, and it's science and technology and a certain amount of social and social compassion with figures like Florence Nightingale. So it's not science and technology for the sake of science and technology. It's science and technology for the delivery of a new type of society, and that's the really key thing that I want you to grasp. I actually have the original program for the festival in my office, so if anyone comes to talk to me in my office hours, I'll let you touch it. Okay, so let's wrap this up. Okay, so the first and really most important thing that you've got to get is that after the Second World War, the Labour government puts in place for the first time this new system of social democracy that promises a new social contract between the British people and the state, that tries to build a new model community of society as an alliance of all social groups and classes, and does so through the provision of universal forms of welfare available to all, and delivered through this combination of the mixed economy of public and private ownership. And that this system that is put in place in the 1940s is a system that persists and prevails right the way down to the 1980s, and some would argue much further than that too. Nonetheless, to me, the 1980s is a key turning point, and in which the types of economic and social organisation that had become the norm in the post-war period become criticised and dismantled. And what I've been trying to do today is to try and show you some of the strengths of that system, some of the achievements of that system, and also some of its frailties, some of the compromised nature of its delivery. Part of that, I've been suggesting, is that this was not a democratic revolution. This was not Orwell's dream of the English Revolution. It was instead, I've been suggesting, one in which society as a whole was to be taken care of by technocratic experts who knew that there were three types of mind that could be modelled onto an education system, who knew that cities should be planned around socially mixed villages, etc., etc., etc. And of course, one of the reasons why this system begins to unravel in the 1980s is that people become less prepared to trust in experts to deliver their health and welfare. They want increasingly to take responsibility for that stuff by themselves. And even though I've been emphasizing that in some of these areas, like housing is a good example, there's an attempt, and employment, there's an attempt to try and get people democratically involved in the process. All of those are basically pretty much failures. The other point that I've been trying to drive home repeatedly is that the infrastructures that this new system was to be built around were also compromised. And they were compromised by the Victorian and their Victorian inheritance, the schools, the hospitals, etc., etc. And what I've been also trying to say is that limitation was ideological as much as financial or material. That many of the old sense of the differences of class and of gender and of ethnicity, and I haven't talked about the empire at all, but I'm going to come back to that importantly in the next lecture, continue to mark and to demarcate how it was that these things were going to be delivered. So there's this promise of society as a universal thing where everybody gets treated differently, and yet the old sense of the importance of differences of class and of gender remain hugely important in terms of the delivery and experience of this new system. So one of the reasons why we might explain the material limitations of the Reconstruction is, of course, the financial predicament that Britain faced in the 1940s and the 1950s, hamstrung by the cost of the two world wars, hamstrung also, as we'll see in the next lecture, by its continuing ambition to play a leading role in world affairs, to try and position itself within the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union, and critically, to try and hold on to its empire, to enable it to have this expanded role on the global stage. All of these things, I think, are fundamental to the compromised nature of the reconstruction of social democracy after the Second World War. Thank you. You are done.